This story is titled, My Fiancée Overheard My Parents Saying She Wasn't on My Level, Not Knowing Her True Identity, and when she finally exposed everything about herself, they regretted their words and started begging for forgiveness. Hey Reddit, I'm a 29-year-old guy who, until a few months ago, genuinely thought I had one of those rare, peaceful lives people envy. I married my high school sweetheart, Lily, when we were both 24. We bought a modest home in a quiet neighborhood in Chicago and settled into what I thought was domestic bliss. I landed a stable job as a civil engineer that let me clock out at 5 every day. No overtime, no weekend work, just a steady paycheck and predictable hours. My family seemed to love Lily, or at least that's what I believed for years. They always greeted her with enthusiastic hugs, brought her little thoughtful gifts, and joked around with her comfortably. The way they acted around her, you'd think she was their favorite person in the world. I never questioned it. Why would I? Everything appeared perfect on the surface. A few months back, we planned a weekend trip to visit my parents. They live just 2 hours away in Madison, and we typically visit them a few times a year. Nothing unusual about this particular trip. Lily had even offered to help my mother plan their upcoming anniversary party. She was fully invested in making it special, with Pinterest boards filled with decoration ideas, sample menus carefully curated, and floral arrangement options all prepared. My mom seemed genuinely excited about Lily's input too. She had even called Lily twice that week specifically to discuss centerpiece options for the tables. Everything looked completely normal to me. We arrived at my parents' house on Friday night, had a pleasant dinner together, and settled into the guest room for the night. Saturday morning, Lily was busy in the kitchen helping my mom prep for the party, discussing details and working through the planning process. At one point, I ran out to pick up drinks from the store. Nothing unusual. Just a quick errand to grab some beverages for everyone. When I returned, Lily was in the living room with my dad and brother. She was helping him fix something on his phone. A typical scene since she's always been more tech-savvy than most of my family. But I noticed she seemed quieter than usual, more withdrawn. I didn't press her about it at the time. I figured she was just tired. It had been a long day of planning and socializing after all. On the drive back home Sunday evening, her unusual quietness became impossible to ignore. She barely said a word the entire trip, mostly just looking out the window with a distant expression. When she did respond to my attempts at conversation, her replies were in short sentences, accompanied by forced smiles that never reached her eyes. I asked if something was wrong, concerned about her unusual behavior, but she just said she was fine, just exhausted from the weekend. I believed her. Or maybe I just wanted to believe her. Either way, I didn't push the issue further. That night, after we'd unpacked our bags and eaten a quiet dinner, she came into the living room where I was watching TV and asked me to sit down with her. There was something different about her demeanor. She was calm, almost unnaturally so. She didn't fidget or pace as she might normally when something was bothering her. She just looked at me directly and said, "I need to tell you what happened at your parents' house." Lily explained that while she was helping my mom in the kitchen during our visit, she had gone back in after forgetting her phone on the counter. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop on anyone's conversation. It just happened that she overheard voices coming from the kitchen as she approached. It was my mom and my sister Olivia, and they clearly didn't know Lily was within earshot. My sister had laughed and said, "She trapped him. He could have done so much better." My mother's response was even worse. "She got pregnant just to keep him around. That's what girls like her do." What they didn't know, what no one in my family knew, was that Lily had miscarried the year before. We never told anyone because it had been an incredibly painful experience for both of us, but especially for Lily. She hadn't been ready to talk about it publicly, and I respected her need for privacy during that difficult time. To hear that my family believed she had faked or manipulated a pregnancy just to hold on to me, it hit her harder than I could have possibly imagined. "I didn't plan to say anything," she told me, her voice steady despite the pain I could see in her eyes. But the more I thought about it on the drive home, the less I could let it go. I couldn't pretend I didn't hear what they really think of me. I immediately tried to explain it away, desperately searching for any interpretation that wouldn't mean my family had been harboring such cruel thoughts about my wife for years. "Maybe they were joking," I suggested weakly. "Maybe it was sarcasm. Or maybe you misunderstood the context of what they were saying." That's when Lily pulled out her phone and held it up with an unmistakable certainty. "I recorded it," she said simply. She explained that she hadn't intended to record their conversation. She had set her phone down on the kitchen counter with the voice recorder still running from earlier, when she was making a voice note about the catering budget for my parents' anniversary party. It was pure coincidence, or perhaps fate, that their true feelings had been captured so clearly. When she played the recording for me, there was no room for misinterpretation. It wasn't a misunderstanding. Their voices were crystal clear as they mocked her and ridiculed her character. My sister said I was blind not to see through Lily's act. My mother claimed Lily was too polished to be real, too soft-spoken to be sincere. They both agreed that she didn't actually love me. She merely tolerated me for financial security. And then they laughed together, as if my marriage was some kind of joke to them. My hands were shaking by the time the recording ended. I felt sick to my stomach, a mixture of disbelief and betrayal washing over me. I called my sister first, my voice unsteady with barely controlled anger. She immediately went into panic mode when I confronted her, denying it at first with theatrical indignation. Then, when that didn't work, she tried to spin their conversation as just harmless venting and friendly joking between family members. When I told her there was a recording of everything they'd said, she went silent for several long seconds. Then she switched tactics, guilt-tripping me for not having a sense of humor, and making a big deal out of nothing. My mother's response was even worse when I called her next. She didn't even try to deny what they'd said. Instead, she told me that Lily was too sensitive and that women need thicker skin if they want to be part of a real family. She acted as if Lily was the one who had done something wrong by overhearing their cruel words. Through all of this, Lily didn't argue with them or engage in shouting matches over the phone. She didn't cry or yell, which surprised me given the depth of the betrayal. She just nodded as I relayed what my mother and sister had said in their own defense. And then she calmly stated, "I'll handle it." That was when I knew something in her had fundamentally changed. It wasn't simple sadness I was seeing, and it wasn't even straightforward anger. It was something else entirely. A profound emotional distance had opened up, as if she was pulling away from my family completely. She didn't ask for my permission to cut ties with them. She was simply letting me know where she stood on the matter. A day after our confrontations, my sister posted something pointed in the family group chat. "People need to learn to take a joke." My cousin liked the message, but no one else responded. Not even my dad, which was telling. The battle lines were being drawn, and the silence from other family members spoke volumes. Lily stopped attending family gatherings after that. She also started working from coffee shops more often, saying the change of environment helped her focus better. But I noticed she wasn't just working on her usual professional projects. Her laptop was always open to long documents, detailed notes, and extensive research that clearly wasn't related to her regular job. Something was definitely brewing beneath her calm exterior, but she kept her activities private for the time being. My parents kept sending us dinner invitations, acting as if nothing significant had happened. I went alone once, feeling like I needed to at least hear them out, but it was a complete disaster. The moment I sat down, I felt like I was walking into a courtroom where Lily had already been tried and convicted in her absence. They spent the entire evening telling me that Lily was controlling and manipulative, that she was turning me against my own family, and that I was being blindly led away from the people who truly loved me. It was exhausting and infuriating. That was the last time I visited their house. What I didn't know at the time was that Lily had already started reaching out to lawyers. She wasn't planning to leave me, as some might have suspected. She was methodically planning a different kind of response to the situation. 3 days after that final disastrous dinner at my parents' house, I came home from work to find our dining table completely covered in neatly stacked folders. This wasn't random paperwork or casual clutter. These were carefully organized documents with color-coded tabs, clearly labeled files, highlighters marking important sections, and printouts arranged in chronological order. Lily was sitting on the couch with her laptop open, typing intently with earbuds in. When she noticed me standing there confused, she didn't say a word. She just pointed to the table and went back to her work, leaving me to discover what she had uncovered on my own. Inside the folders were bank statements, tax returns, old chat logs, and email chains, documents I hadn't looked at in years. She had meticulously flagged suspicious transactions, highlighted account numbers, and even printed out a PDF of a bank authorization form. At the top of one particularly thick folder, she had written "Look closely" in her neat handwriting. I turned to page 3 as directed and discovered something shocking. 2 years ago, Lily and I had opened a shared business account when we were considering starting a side project together. We never fully launched the business, but we kept the account open with a modest amount of money in it for emergencies or future ideas. According to the paperwork Lily had gathered, My parents had somehow withdrawn over $16,000 from that account without my knowledge or consent. The evidence was damning. Lily had found the bank record showing the transfer, and right beside it was an email from the branch confirming they'd spoken to my mother, who had told them I had approved the withdrawal. There was even a scanned form with what appeared to be my signature authorizing the transaction. The problem? I had never signed that document. The signature was a forgery. In the next folder was an email chain between my mother and sister. This wasn't just about money. It revealed that my sister had convinced my parents to help her launch a bakery business several years ago. Lily and I had heard about this bakery venture, but we were always told my sister had secured a small business loan to fund it. According to these emails, that wasn't true at all. It was our money that had been used to finance her business, and they had never intended to return a single cent. When Lily laid everything out that night, she didn't rage or pace around dramatically. She simply went through each item methodically, showing me emails, pointing to relevant dates, highlighting names and transactions. When she finished her presentation, she asked me just one question. Did you know? I didn't. I hadn't known about any of it, not one single part of the deception. The depth of my family's betrayal left me speechless and nauseous. I sat down and read every single page in those folders. The evidence of years of financial manipulation and outright theft spreading out before me like a map of betrayal. When I finally looked up at Lily, my eyes burning with anger and hurt, she gave me a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Either I could stand with her as she pursued justice, or I could stay out of her way. There was no third option where we just let this go. Do what you need to do, I told her, my voice hoarse with emotion. 2 days later, legal papers were filed. Lily pressed charges for fraud and identity theft against my parents. My mother was served with the legal documents while attending her weekly book club meeting in front of 6 of her closest friends. The public nature of this delivery was no accident. It was the first move in Lily's carefully orchestrated response. My mother tried to call me afterward, leaving 4 missed calls, 2 voicemails full of tearful indignation, and 1 furious text message demanding an explanation. I didn't respond to any of them. The next call came from my father. He didn't waste time asking for details or explanations. He went straight to shouting, blaming Lily for tearing the family apart, claiming she was manipulating me and poisoning everything good in our lives. I cut him off mid-rant and told him they had done that all on their own through years of deception and theft. Then, I blocked his number, severing another connection to my former life. That same evening, my sister took to social media with a long, dramatic caption about betrayal. She wrote vaguely about outsiders ruining sibling bonds and how people should keep private matters away from legal documents. She didn't use our names explicitly, but she didn't have to. Everyone in our circle knew exactly who she was talking about. Her friends flooded the comments section with sympathy and supportive messages. A few even took it upon themselves to message me directly, trying to explain my sister's emotional state and why I should be more understanding of her situation. I ignored every single message. Lily didn't engage in any online drama or try to defend herself publicly. Instead, she sent one carefully crafted email, a single message addressed to our extended family. She attached all the evidence: the fake authorization form with the forged signature, the bank statements showing the unauthorized withdrawals, and the damning emails between my mother and sister discussing how they had misappropriated our money. There was no emotional commentary, no angry ranting, just the subject line. Here's the truth. The response was immediate and unexpected. 3 of my cousins responded within the hour, and they didn't just express sympathy. They shared their own stories of financial manipulation by my parents. One cousin revealed he had given them $5,000 years ago during what they claimed was a health emergency. They had promised to repay him within 6 months, but the money never materialized again. Another cousin's college fund had mysteriously disappeared after my parents had offered to manage it for her. The pattern of financial exploitation apparently extended far beyond just Lily and me. A few days after Lily's email, my sister showed up unannounced at our house. She wasn't calm or collected like Lily. She parked her car halfway on our front lawn and started screaming before she even reached our front door. Her face was contorted with rage as she shouted that we had ruined her future, humiliated her publicly, and turned everyone in the family against her. Lily didn't engage with the hysterics. She simply called the police, who arrived quickly and issued my sister a formal trespassing warning, instructing her not to return to our property. We haven't seen her in person since that day. The anniversary party my parents had been planning, the very one Lily had been helping to organize, never happened. The family group chat that had once been active with planning details went completely silent. No one brought up the celebration again. It simply disappeared from the calendar as if it had never been planned in the first place. My father sent one last message before I blocked him completely, saying I had chosen wrong and burned bridges that could never be rebuilt. I didn't bother to reply. A week after that confrontation, a family friend who sat on my father's business board pulled out of a long-pending real estate deal. He had seen the documents Lily had sent around, and one discovery had led to another. My father's financial records were being picked apart by more than just family now. That fallout is still unfolding, with new revelations appearing regularly. Not everyone turned against us, though. One of my aunts called Lily directly. Unlike the others, she didn't make excuses for my parents' behavior. She said she had witnessed this pattern for years and had stayed quiet out of family loyalty. According to her, Lily was the first person to actually stand up to their manipulation and call it what it was. A few days ago, my parents tried again to reach us, this time with a hand-delivered letter. They wrote that they still believed I could come to my senses and that there was still time to leave Lily and make things right with the family. I shredded the letter and tossed it in the trash without a second thought. I haven't spoken to either of them since our initial confrontation, and I have no plans to change that. Through all of this chaos, Lily didn't respond with angry outbursts or public denunciations. She didn't post cryptic messages on social media or engage in angry phone calls. She stayed quiet and moved with precise intention, the same way she used to handle client crises back when she managed legal compliance for nonprofits. This was just another kind of project to her, one she had been unknowingly preparing for throughout her professional life. The week after the trespassing incident with my sister, Lily filed a formal complaint with the licensing board that oversees my sister's profession. This wasn't done out of spite or emotional reaction. It was simply a factual report containing all relevant information: the fraud charges, police records from the trespassing incident, and bank documents showing financial misconduct. Everything was submitted in perfect order, with no embellishment needed. 2 weeks later, my sister's professional license was suspended pending a full investigation. She found out through an official letter that was taped to her front door. Predictably, she blamed Lily for her predicament, leaving angry voicemails on mutual friends' phones and posting vague threats online. But legally, she wasn't allowed to contact us directly anymore due to the earlier trespassing warning. Lily didn't respond to any of the drama, and neither did I. We simply forwarded the threatening messages to our attorney and continued with our lives. That's when the real smear campaign began in earnest. My parents switched strategies from direct confrontation to widespread character assassination. They started telling extended family members, old neighbors, even people from their church congregation that Lily was mentally unstable. According to their new narrative, she had isolated me from everyone I loved and was controlling my every move. They described her as obsessed, dangerous, and unstable. A few distant relatives believed these stories, but most people stayed quiet, unwilling to get involved. Then, unexpectedly, one of my mother's old co-workers emailed me screenshots of texts she had received. They contained long, unhinged rants full of outright lies about Lily and me. Our lawyer sent cease and desist letters the very next day. One cease and desist letter was delivered to my parents' house. It arrived in a simple white envelope, accompanied by a bouquet of white roses. There was no note attached to the flowers, just the legal document and the silent message it conveyed. This symbolic delivery only deepened the growing split in our extended family. My mother's younger brother, an uncle I'd once been close to, publicly sided with my parents. He made dramatic claims about how Lily and I were attacking the family legacy and destroying generations of trust. His daughter, my cousin, had a completely different reaction, however. She privately messaged Lily with a simple but profound statement: "You're doing what I never could." Shortly after sending that message, she deleted all her social media accounts and went completely quiet. We never brought up her message or pressured her for details. The implication was clear enough. About a week later, something unexpected happened that shifted the dynamic even further. My father received an official notice from the Internal Revenue Service. They were requesting additional information on several of his past tax returns, citing irregularities that needed clarification. There were questions about missing income, unreported gifts, and other financial discrepancies. No one knew who had sent the tip to the IRS that triggered this audit. Lily never admitted to being the source, but when she received the notification letter, She simply folded it neatly and added it to her growing binder of documentation without comment. The IRS audit was just the beginning of another wave of discoveries. Through her meticulous investigation of our financial records, Lily found bank statements revealing that my father had quietly withdrawn $8,000 from our wedding fund years ago, while we were still dating and saving for our ceremony. He had used this money to invest in another one of my sister's failed business ventures, a boutique clothing line that had closed down within 6 months of opening. They had never told us about this theft, and clearly, they had never planned to. Lily uncovered it through a paper trail they had assumed no one would ever bother to check. That revelation was the final straw for Lily. She sent one last message to my sister. Just a single line. "You buried me. Now it's your turn." Then she blocked her number and email address completely, cutting off the last line of direct communication. I followed her lead without hesitation, blocking every cousin, aunt, uncle, and old friend who had chosen to side with my family in this conflict. We weren't arguing anymore or trying to convince anyone of anything. We were simply done with all of it. A few people reached out to me later, mostly old friends I hadn't spoken to since college. One of them texted me saying, "Your wife is terrifying, man." I responded honestly, "She's just finally free." No one had seen this side of her before, not even me. Lily started therapy around that time, not because she was emotionally falling apart, but because she wanted to focus her anger productively. She approached those therapy sessions with the same organized, clear-headed determination she brought to every other aspect of this situation. Her therapist told her she had one of the sharpest, most analytical minds she'd ever encountered in her practice. Within a month of starting therapy, Lily had transformed those sessions into something much bigger. One afternoon, she received a call from a college friend who worked in publishing. This friend had seen some of the writing Lily had begun sharing in private circles. Essays analyzing manipulation tactics, breakdowns of what had happened to us, and reflections on how emotional and financial abuse often hides behind a veneer of politeness and family loyalty. The friend saw potential in Lily's clear, precise voice and pitched her a book deal. Lily didn't immediately accept the offer. She carefully negotiated the terms, insisting on full creative control. She didn't want a ghostwriter or an editor who might water down her message or soften the impact of her words. Once the terms were settled to her satisfaction, she started writing the following week. She titled the book The Daughter-in-Law, a simple but pointed reference to her position in the family structure. This wasn't a revenge tale, or even a direct account of our specific family situation. Instead, Lily crafted it as part survival guide, part roadmap for women dealing with subtle control mechanisms disguised as family love and tradition. She wrote it like a manual for people who might not have the concrete proof we had gathered. People who were being gaslit and manipulated, but couldn't quite put their finger on why they always felt diminished after family gatherings. Lily wrote with incredible focus, often working late into the night with headphones on, typing steadily for hours. She didn't rush the process, taking time to outline every chapter carefully and link each section to real-life resources. She consulted with therapists, attorneys, and women's advocacy groups to ensure her advice was both practical and ethical. What had started as a book project evolved into something larger. It became her authentic voice, perhaps for the first time. Watching her work, I started seeing Lily differently. I realized she wasn't someone I needed to protect or shield from my family's dysfunction. She was someone who had already saved herself long ago and had simply been waiting for the right moment to show her true strength. I was witnessing the emergence of a person who had always been there, just beneath the surface of the soft-spoken woman my family had so completely underestimated. The last time anyone from my family attempted to reach us directly was through a forwarded email from a cousin. It contained a scanned handwritten note from my mother, complaining that her reputation had been unfairly damaged and suggesting that Lily should consider apologizing before it's too late. The passive-aggressive threat was obvious. We didn't bother to reply. Our lawyer simply added the message to our growing file of evidence. Just last night, Lily finished the manuscript for her book, but she's far from done with her mission. The project took an unexpected turn when she received a text from an old college friend that opened yet another avenue of investigation. This friend mentioned that someone claiming to be from an event planning agency had called her several months after our wedding. The caller had pitched her an exclusive retreat package, knowing her full name, job title, and even the specific table where she had sat during our wedding reception. At the time, her friend had dismissed it as random spam, but in light of recent events, she wondered if there might be a connection. Lily dug into this new information immediately with the same methodical approach she'd applied to everything else. Within a week, she had contacted over a dozen guests from our wedding. 5 of them clearly remembered being contacted by someone claiming to be affiliated with an event planning service. One guest specifically recalled the caller using my sister's name. Another had even saved an old voicemail from the call and forwarded it to Lily. She recognized the voice instantly. It was unmistakably my sister. It became clear that my sister had taken our wedding guest list and used it to build a cold call database for a business she was quietly launching on the side. She had never mentioned this to us. It wasn't disclosed in her official marketing materials, and none of our wedding guests had ever consented to having their information used this way. She had essentially stolen personal contact information from our celebration and used it for her own financial gain. Lily didn't hesitate to take action. She filed formal complaints with the Better Business Bureau and submitted a detailed report to a state fraud tip line. She included call logs, guest statements, and even an archived version of my sister's now-defunct website, which had listed the retreat company under a slightly different name. No one had connected these dots before, but the evidence was unmistakable once Lily laid it all out. That same week, a local reporter contacted Lily out of the blue. Word had begun spreading through community forums about financial misconduct tied to a well-known family in the area. Someone had anonymously dropped hints about my sister's license suspension and the police involvement from the trespassing incident. The reporter requested a meeting to discuss the situation. Lily agreed, but set clear boundaries. The conversation would be off the record, and she would only speak with her lawyer present. While the reporter began investigating the broader story, my sister made yet another desperate move. She began emailing our wedding guests again, this time with an entirely new fabricated narrative. She claimed that Lily had somehow hacked into her business contacts, that Lily was mentally unstable, and that she, my sister, was the real victim in this situation. She begged former guests for character references and tried to frame the entire situation as a simple family misunderstanding that had spiraled out of control. Lily didn't respond directly to any of this. She simply collected the forwarded messages from concerned guests and sent everything to her attorney. Within days, new cease and desist letters were issued. Not just to my sister this time, but also to my mother and father, who had been forwarding the same defamatory emails from their personal accounts. Once these legal documents were served, we blocked them all permanently. No calls, no texts, no emails would get through anymore. From that point forward, they were legally required to direct any form of communication through our counsel. Then came the leaks that blew the situation wide open. One by one, old group chat screenshots started appearing online. Lily had forwarded them to trusted contacts in advocacy circles, who began anonymously sharing them in response to the ongoing smear campaign. These screenshots were from conversations that had taken place a few months before everything exploded. In them, my mother had been explicitly planning how to humiliate Lily during an upcoming family dinner. The messages detailed a calculated approach, fake compliments that contained subtle digs, underhanded comments designed to make Lily doubt herself, and even a script of exactly what to say in front of other family members to maximize her embarrassment. My sister had responded to these plans with laughing emojis and added her own cruel suggestions to the mix. Lily read through the leaked screenshots, thanked the cousin who had shared them with her, and forwarded the entire chat log to the reporter who had contacted her earlier. That was the moment when things began to shift from a private family matter to a more public story. The reporter expanded the scope of their investigation, transforming what had started as a piece on family tension into a wider expose. The focus shifted to include potential identity theft, financial fraud, and the harassment tactics used to silence someone who had simply spoken up about abuse. Though the article hasn't been published yet, the buzz around the investigation was enough to cause serious problems for my father professionally. His company called an emergency board meeting, and by the end of the week, he was placed on administrative leave. Officially, this was described as a leave of absence pending internal review, but unofficially, his name was becoming a liability the company couldn't afford. Shareholders had started asking uncomfortable questions after someone from my father's industry network forwarded screenshots from the family email thread that had been quietly circulating for weeks. In our neighborhood, things got strange as well. People who had always been friendly suddenly stopped making small talk at church. A woman who had smiled at us for years now avoided eye contact in the grocery store. Someone told us my sister was going around claiming she'd been canceled by her own family and had lost everything because she dared to stand up to Lily. Most people didn't buy into this twisted version of events, but some did, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere around town. Through all of this, Lily remained focused on documentation rather than public battles. Every email, every voicemail, every legal form, every financial record was meticulously organized and uploaded into a secure digital archive. This archive was organized chronologically by incident, cross-referenced by date, and backed up in 3 different secure locations. Her attorney called it one of the most comprehensive and well-prepared personal case files he had ever seen in his career. This wasn't just for legal protection anymore. It was proof, a permanent record that no one could deny, distort, or destroy. Lily started adding voice memos to the archive as well, though these weren't meant for anyone else. They were simply her way of time-stamping what had happened in her own words. In these recordings, she spoke clearly and concisely, almost like she was reading court notes. There was no emotional ranting, just facts stated for the record. The more she added to this archive, the more obvious it became that this wasn't about revenge for Lily. This was about truth. Truth backed by records, confirmed by timestamps, and protected by law. Every piece of evidence she gathered was another brick in the wall between her new life and the toxic environment she had escaped. My sister's last desperate attempt at communication came the day before the newspaper article was scheduled to go live. She sent a short email begging Lily not to ruin what's left of their family's name. We didn't reply. Lily simply forwarded it to her attorney, saved a copy in her archive, and closed her laptop. The article was coming, and once it was published, there would be nowhere left for them to hide from the consequences of their actions. The call came in on a Thursday afternoon. It was Lily's college friend, the same one who had helped connect her with the book deal. She was working on a documentary series about modern family systems and generational control patterns. After reviewing the outline of Lily's story and understanding the extensive documentation we had gathered, she pitched the idea of turning it into a full-feature documentary. Lily agreed to participate, but only under one non-negotiable condition: full creative control. She didn't want producers watering down the message or re-editing the content to soften the impact. Either they would tell the whole truth, or we wouldn't participate at all. Within a week of reaching an agreement, a small documentary crew was in our home. There was nothing flashy or dramatic about their approach. Just 2 cameras, a sound technician, and a person with a handheld stabilizer. They filmed everything with a focus on authenticity. Interviews with Lily as she explained her experience, detailed walkthroughs of her documentation process, and even quiet moments where she simply worked on organizing her digital archive. There were no artificial reenactments or dramatized scenes, just the powerful reality of what had happened and how she had responded. The documentary team didn't chase drama or try to manufacture emotional moments. They captured details, the meticulous way Lily had organized evidence, the precise language she used when describing events, the careful cross-referencing system she had developed. They followed her to meetings with her lawyer, filmed some of her therapy sessions with appropriate permissions, and even recorded a small conference where she gave a talk about boundary setting and recognizing toxic family dynamics. Every aspect of the production was built around transparency and accuracy. News about the documentary leaked before we were ready to announce it publicly. A cousin who hadn't spoken to us in months posted a vague but clearly pointed status update on social media. Just enough information to stir curiosity and concern. Within hours, the family group chats we had once been part of, but were now excluded from, exploded with activity. Someone who still maintained contact with both sides forwarded screenshots of the conversations to us. My sister immediately called her attorney. My father did the same. Various threats about legal action and ceasing production were thrown around freely, but none of them had any actual impact. Lily's lawyer had already filed the necessary protections. Every piece of footage was legally covered under documentary production standards. Every document shown on camera had been carefully vetted and approved under investigative reporting guidelines. No one was being recorded without proper consent, and every name tied to criminal or civil actions was being handled according to strict legal standards. There were simply no vulnerabilities for them to exploit in their attempts to shut down the project. My parents, growing increasingly desperate, tried hiring a public relations firm to manage the damage to their reputation. The firm declined to take them on as clients after reviewing the allegations against them. Their assessment was blunt. There was too much risk, too extensive a paper trail, and representing my parents wasn't worth the potential damage to their own corporate reputation. That rejection was never supposed to become public knowledge, but somehow the email the firm had sent declining their business was leaked. It circulated quickly among people who had been following the situation. Then came another devastating revelation. One of my cousins on my father's side contacted Lily privately with information she had discovered. She had found old bank documents her father had been holding onto, which showed that years ago, my father had quietly moved money out of a trust fund that was originally meant for both my sister and me. According to these records, my sister had received her half of the inheritance early, but I had never seen a penny of my portion. This transaction had been done quietly, buried under complex legal language, without ever notifying me of my rightful inheritance. Lily advised me to get my own separate attorney to handle this specific issue, which I did immediately. We filed motions to review all financial records connected to that trust. The investigation revealed that my father had used our childhood savings to fund his risky investments, personal purchases, and loans to friends, all without any intention of repaying the money or even informing me of its existence. The documentation lined up perfectly with tax records, emails, and even one particularly damning message he had sent to a friend, joking that he hoped I'd never notice the missing funds. While this legal process was underway, a short teaser for the documentary was released online. It was just 2 minutes long, featuring Lily speaking calmly over a montage of documents, screenshots, and brief clips of her organizing files. The teaser didn't mention specific names or directly identify my family. It didn't need to. The story was compelling enough on its own merits. The comment section filled up within hours of posting. Thousands of people watched it, some trying to guess who the story was about, others simply expressing support and asking when the full version would be available. Lily didn't respond to any of the comments or engage with the public speculation. She wasn't chasing attention or validation. She just wanted the complete, unvarnished truth on record. Not long after the teaser was released, Lily began receiving anonymous threats through email. These messages warned her to stop production, called her horrible names, and made vague but menacing threats about what might happen if she continued. She reported every single one of these threats to law enforcement and our legal team. We installed new security cameras around our home, upgraded our alarm system, and began limiting our public appearances as a precaution. Lily's publisher released a brief statement confirming the harassment, but provided no additional details that might fuel further aggression. Then the leaks intensified. One by one, additional group chat screenshots started appearing online. These weren't coming from us. Someone else with access to these family conversations had started releasing the messages in carefully timed batches. These weren't edited or taken out of context. They were authentic conversations where my sister, my mother, and various extended relatives had openly mocked Lily, planned social pranks designed to humiliate her, and laughed about hiding certain financial transactions from me. They had even joked about getting Lily drunk at a family party to catch her slipping and saying something they could use against her later. The public comments on these leaked conversations were overwhelmingly disgusted by my family's behavior. With each new revelation, more people distanced themselves from my parents. Former friends stopped calling them. Old coworkers removed them from group chats and social circles. A local charity quietly removed my father's name from their donor list. The pressure was clearly becoming unbearable for them. Unable to reach me directly through any of the channels I had blocked, my father resorted to calling my workplace. He left a message with the front desk asking to speak with me privately about urgent family matters. Our company's HR department flagged this immediately as a potential security concern, and I filed a formal no-contact notice the same day. That closed the final personal channel he had left to reach me. Through all of this escalating drama, Lily didn't gloat or celebrate. She simply kept detailed notes in her journal each time something shifted. A legal response, a ruling, another piece of truth coming to light. She wrote it all down methodically and moved on to the next task. She didn't rush or get distracted by side issues. She stayed completely focused on her ultimate goal, full accountability. Then came the audit that would ultimately destroy what remained of my father's reputation and career. Official paperwork was served to his company, a comprehensive financial review that we had nothing to do with initiating. We didn't request it or even know it was coming. But after everything that had gone public about our situation, someone at the state level had apparently triggered a deeper investigation into his business practices. That audit is still ongoing, but its effects were immediate and devastating. What started as a routine financial review quickly escalated into a multi-agency investigation. The auditors uncovered a pattern of misfiled charitable donations dating back years, offshore transfers that had never been properly disclosed to regulatory agencies, and fake expense reports used to claim business deductions for what were clearly luxury personal vacations. His CFO was questioned by investigators, then quietly resigned the following week. 2 more senior staff members followed suit within days. Everything in my father's carefully constructed business empire began to spiral out of control. While that storm grew around my father's company, my legal team made significant progress on our personal case. They uncovered a document filed with the Trust Administration Office that was supposedly signed by me, requesting a delay in the disbursement of my half of the inheritance. The signature wasn't mine. It had been scanned from another form I had legitimately signed years ago and digitally copied onto this different document. The handwriting styles didn't even match when compared side by side. This discovery alone pushed our case from a civil dispute into potential criminal fraud territory. A few days later, we attended a preliminary hearing related to the trust fund issue. My parents' attorney tried to downplay our claims as simple family miscommunication and misunderstandings about financial intentions. Then, Lily's now infamous binder came out. The judge was presented with color-coded tabs, highlighted entries, precise timestamps, and irrefutable documentation. She paused more than once during the proceedings to examine the documents herself, at one point openly questioning the ethics of both my parents in the courtroom. Their attorney requested a recess halfway through the hearing. He clearly wasn't prepared for the depth and breadth of the paper trail Lily had assembled. Back at home, Lily continued her methodical organization of evidence. She pulled out an older folder she had nearly forgotten about in the chaos of recent events. Inside was a notarized letter from 5 years ago that my father had signed, promising to repay a 5-figure loan he had taken from our shared account. It contained his handwriting, his signature, and had been witnessed and stamped by a third party. We had never seen a cent of that money returned to us. This document became yet another piece of evidence in our growing case. News about the audit began affecting my father's public connections and reputation. One of the charitable boards he sat on announced a complete freeze on all activity pending internal investigation. They posted a brief statement citing pending internal concerns that required immediate attention. While my father wasn't mentioned by name, everyone in those circles understood exactly what had prompted this sudden action. Several of his social media profiles quietly disappeared over the following days. No public comment or explanation, just a silent retreat from visibility as the walls closed in. Then came the desperate attempts to recover some financial stability. My sister launched a GoFundMe campaign with the melodramatic title, "Help Me Survive Legal Persecution." The description was intentionally vague, blaming unnamed in-laws and online mobs for her situation, while conveniently omitting any mention of her actual misconduct. Within hours, people who knew the real story began flagging the campaign for fraudulent representation. The fundraiser was taken down the same day by the platform's administrative team. Lily didn't respond publicly to any of this. She didn't need to. The documentation of my sister's actions spoke louder than any rebuttal could have. Messages started arriving again, but with a very different tone than before. People who had initially taken my family's side began reaching out one by one. Some were old friends. Others were extended family members who had initially believed the lies they were told. They apologized for their judgment, many admitting they had been misled for too long. Others contacted Lily specifically for advice on how to protect themselves from similar financial manipulation or family pressure in their own lives. She responded to each request not with a lecture or criticism, but with links to helpful resources, legal aid sites, financial literacy guides, and support groups for people dealing with toxic family dynamics. No angry rants or "I told you so" moments, just practical tools to help others protect themselves. Then we received an unmarked envelope in our mailbox. There was no return address, nothing to indicate who had sent it. Inside were expense reports, pay stubs, and handwritten meeting notes, all from inside my father's company. The handwriting matched one of his longtime executive assistants. It was a clear but quiet signal that someone from the inside of his organization was finally done covering for his misconduct. Lily gave everything to our lawyer without hesitation. More connections were made, more inconsistencies were documented, and the case against my father grew stronger by the day. The final professional blow for my sister came shortly after. Her business license, already under suspension pending investigation, was officially and permanently revoked. The investigation had uncovered forged vendor contracts and a fake insurance policy listed on her official business filings. Without the license, she could no longer legally operate in her field. Without clients, she had no path to financial recovery. The bank accounts linked to her business were shut down. Her professional identity, built largely on deception, had completely collapsed. Meanwhile, rumors began circulating that my parents were preparing to sell their second property, a vacation home they had once proudly shown off at every family gathering. Now, it was quietly listed on the market without any public announcement. The legal bills were clearly mounting for them. The trust fund investigation alone had required multiple court filings and attorney fees. When Lily heard this news through our lawyer, her only response was, "Not our mess to clean up." She had no interest in their financial difficulties, problems entirely of their own making. At home, things were remarkably calm despite the continuing external drama. There was no chaos, no heated arguments about what to do next. We simply maintained our routine, eating dinner together every night, talking about our work projects, planning trips, and focusing on building our future together. The family drama was still unfolding, but it wasn't ours to manage anymore. We had set boundaries and were sticking to them, allowing the consequences to play out naturally. Then we received an unexpected call that would take Lily's story to an even wider audience. A major streaming platform had seen the teaser for the documentary and reached out with interest. They wanted to back the project fully, offering resources for a global release that would reach millions of viewers. Lily negotiated the deal herself, demonstrating yet again that she was nobody's victim. She didn't simply accept their initial terms. She methodically rewrote them to ensure she maintained control over how her story was presented. She secured producer credit, editorial control, and final cut approval. The deal was signed within a week on her terms, not theirs. New professional opportunities followed this breakthrough. A client from one of my engineering projects reached out to Lily privately. He was building a digital advocacy campaign focused on financial recovery and survivor empowerment, and he wanted her unique voice and perspective. She agreed to participate, but again, only on her terms. No middlemen dictating her message, no compromises on content, and no watering down of the hard truths she had learned. The resulting contract paid 3 times her old consulting rate, recognizing the value of her experience and perspective. It became increasingly clear that every time something collapsed on my family's side, something new opened up on ours. Through all of this, Lily never slowed down or lost focus. She kept meticulous notes, followed up on every lead and opportunity, listened carefully to advice from professionals, and steadily rebuilt our life on her terms. What my family had intended as destruction had instead become blueprints for a better future. Lily wasn't merely surviving anymore. She was actively designing the structure for what would come next in our lives. And there was still more to come. The courtroom was packed tighter than usual for our inheritance hearing. My parents sat stiffly on their side, shoulders rigid with tension. My sister sat beside them, deliberately avoiding eye contact with anyone, but staring intently at the floor. Their new attorney looked distinctly uncomfortable, as if he had only been briefed on the case that very morning. The moment the judge began reviewing the documents we had submitted, she immediately flagged several inconsistencies in my father's testimony. His statements didn't match the prior filings he had submitted, and one signed affidavit directly contradicted several of his earlier sworn statements. Then Lily made a devastating move that I hadn't expected. She passed a single-page letter to our lawyer, who handed it directly to the judge. It was a document bearing my father's signature, properly dated, witnessed, and notarized, that proved he had acknowledged the transfer of funds from the inheritance trust years ago, including details about how the money had already been allocated to my sister. This single piece of paper destroyed his credibility in seconds. The evidence was incontrovertible. The judge paused her review, looked straight at my father with unmistakable disappointment, and asked for an explanation for these contradictions. My father attempted to shift blame onto financial advisors and paperwork errors, but his explanations were thin and unconvincing. His attorney requested a short recess, presumably to regroup and develop a new strategy. 10 minutes later, the attorney returned to the courtroom alone and informed the court that he was stepping down as legal counsel, citing a lack of cooperation and ethical conflict with his clients. No one in the courtroom seemed particularly surprised. The evidence was simply too overwhelming to be argued away. Soon after, the subpoenaed bank records arrived, providing even more damning evidence. My college fund had been emptied nearly 6 years earlier. The money had been routed through a personal account belonging to my father, then wired offshore to an investment venture linked to my sister's now-defunct fashion brand. There were emails showing my father personally authorizing these transfers. My name wasn't on any of the transaction documents, and the bank confirmed that none of the withdrawals had been co-signed by me as required for joint accounts. It had been a clean, deliberate theft. While the courtroom drama was unfolding, the second teaser for Lily's documentary went live online. This one included clips from private recordings that had never been made public before. One particularly damning segment caught my sister laughing about Lily's miscarriage. The audio was slightly muffled but clear enough to recognize the voices unmistakably. She had been talking to my mother, mocking what they called Lily's fake sadness and dismissing her grief as a ploy for sympathy. The clip wasn't lengthy, but it was devastating in its cruelty. The response online was immediate and fierce. People who had been my sister's closest friends until recently, those who had defended her just months ago, began publicly distancing themselves from her. One sent Lily a private apology for having doubted her. Another posted a public statement declaring they no longer supported my sister and condemning her behavior. My sister's business social media accounts were locked down within hours as negative comments flooded in. Sponsors who had previously worked with her pulled back from any association. A minor podcast that had once featured her as a guest deleted the episode entirely from their archive. Lily's attorney capitalized on this momentum. A comprehensive civil lawsuit was filed against all three family members: my mother, father, and sister. It focused specifically on financial fraud, breach of trust, and falsified loan agreements. The claim was meticulously structured around notarized documents, bank statements, forged authorizations, and misused business funds. Every single line in the filing was backed by concrete receipts and evidence. The timing couldn't possibly have been worse for my father professionally. Former employees from his company had just filed a class action lawsuit days earlier. Claims of unpaid wages, promised bonuses that never materialized, and misrepresented employment contracts started flooding in from multiple directions. Some came with comprehensive email trails documenting the promises made. One particularly damaging piece of evidence came from a former staff member who included recordings of internal meetings where executives joked openly about delaying payments until employees quit so they wouldn't have to pay what was owed. The company was forced to freeze operations completely while attorneys reviewed the mounting allegations. A distant cousin reached out to us quietly during this time. She informed us that my parents were trying to sell their lake house property quickly, though it wasn't being listed publicly. Word had circulated through family channels that they needed to liquidate assets rapidly. No one offered to help them financially. No one even asked for our perspective on the situation anymore. We didn't respond to this news or get involved in any way. Lily had already filed that entire part of her life away mentally. For her, this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was simply a process that needed to be completed properly. My sister, however, refused to accept defeat gracefully. She launched another GoFundMe campaign, this one framing herself as a target of social media harassment and cancel culture. This fundraising attempt didn't even last a full day. Dozens of people who knew the truth flagged the campaign almost immediately. Comments flooded in, calling out her past behavior, linking to the documentary teaser and publicly available court records. The campaign was removed before it even reached $500 in donations. Then their desperate smear campaign intensified despite the legal warnings. Having received formal cease and desist letters that they chose to ignore, my parents switched tactics. They began spreading false stories about Lily to extended family members, neighbors, and members of their church congregation. These efforts at character assassination were happening at the exact same time that Lily was being invited to speak at a prestigious women's conference on financial literacy and recognizing economic abuse. She accepted the invitation without fanfare. No announcement on social media, no press release, no self-promotion. She simply wrote her speech, flew out quietly to the event, and delivered her message with composure and conviction. A week later, a major news outlet ran a feature on Lily's upcoming documentary. The headline read, "The Woman Who Cracked the Spine of Generational Abuse." The piece quickly went viral online, telling the full arc of her experience, from the manipulation and gaslighting to the financial fraud and emotional abuse, through to the legal battle that followed her discovery. It included an interview with one of the documentary producers, who described Lily as relentless, meticulously prepared, and unflinching in her pursuit of truth. The article brought even more attention to our story, though we remained focused on the legal process rather than public reaction. Not long after that feature was published, My workplace HR department forwarded me a voicemail they had received. It came from my mother, who had called through the general business line since all her direct contacts with me had been blocked. In the message, she begged to make things right, while simultaneously blaming Lily again, and insisting that this has all gone too far. My company's HR team flagged it as potential harassment and passed the recording to our legal department to handle. Then a mysterious tip arrived that would change everything yet again. There was no name attached, no identifying details, just a secure message sent directly to our attorney. It claimed that a federal investigation into my father's financial dealings had begun. The message mentioned something about potential money laundering through shell companies and undeclared assets held overseas. We didn't actively pursue this lead, but by the end of that week, it became apparent that something major had indeed happened. My father had suddenly disappeared from public view entirely. His company email started bouncing back automatic replies. His personal phone was disconnected. Someone had even wiped his social media profiles clean, removing years of content overnight. That night, Lily sat across from me at our dining table after dinner. She looked through her notes one final time, closed her laptop deliberately, and said something that perfectly encapsulated her approach from the beginning. This was never about revenge. I just wanted them to answer for what they did. Now, they are. The court ruling landed on a Monday morning, delivered with a definitiveness that left no room for interpretation. The judgment was short, direct, and unmistakably clear. I was awarded my full share of the inheritance, plus accumulated interest, calculated from the original date of the trust's breach. The judge gave my father 60 days to comply with the financial settlement, or face severe consequences: asset seizure and wage garnishment. Lily was already working with our legal team to prepare claims against whatever remaining real estate my family still owned. There was no appeal filed within the time limit. Perhaps they finally understood that fighting was futile against the mountain of evidence we had assembled. That same week, Lily received another round of threatening messages. One particularly concerning message mentioned specific dates and locations where she had been seen recently, suggesting she was under surveillance. Law enforcement quickly traced the source of these threats to a burner phone that had been purchased using a company card linked to my father's now crumbling firm. Our attorney submitted this evidence with an emergency filing for protection. Lily was granted a comprehensive protective order within 48 hours. We immediately increased security around our property, installing upgraded surveillance systems the very next day. Then came the moment we had been working toward for months. The full documentary launched on a major streaming platform that Friday evening. By Sunday morning, it had surpassed 1 million views. Reviews flooded in immediately, describing the film as stunning, fearless, and a masterclass in standing your ground. The documentary didn't just present the facts of our case. It revealed the entire pattern of manipulation, financial deceit, and generational dysfunction that had been passed off as normal family dynamics for decades. One of the most powerful moments in the first episode featured my mother's voice from an old recording. It was just a brief comment about Lily, never being part of the family no matter how hard she tries, played beneath a montage of photos from birthday parties and holiday dinners where Lily had been present, smiling and trying to fit in. The juxtaposition between the warmth in those images and the coldness in my mother's voice was devastating. A cousin who still speaks to us occasionally mentioned that my mother had smashed a wine glass against the wall in rage after hearing her own words played back in the documentary. After the episode aired, everything started moving even faster. My family faced near-total social ostracization. My parents were banned from their longtime country club, where they had once held prestigious memberships. My mother was quietly removed from her volunteer board position at a local museum. Former church friends stopped acknowledging them, with one family even changing seats when my parents walked into a service. All the shame and social pressure they had once used so effectively to control others had finally come back around and wrapped tightly around them instead. Two of my great-uncles, respected elders in our extended family, published open letters in the town's local newspaper. These weren't digital posts or social media statements. These were real printed declarations that everyone in our community would see. Both letters denounced my parents' behavior explicitly and commended Lily for her strength and clarity in confronting the situation. One particularly powerful line read, "Some inherit land, others inherit silence." She broke that chain with facts, not anger. These relatives didn't reach out to us privately first. They deliberately made their stance public, understanding the importance of visible support. My sister, already under immense pressure, experienced a complete professional freefall. 2 different fraud investigations named her formally as a subject. One came from a former client who had discovered she had forged vendor contracts using templates stolen from our wedding materials. The second came from her ex-business partner, who filed a lawsuit after discovering manipulated budget sheets and misrepresented finances. Public records showed she had been evicted from her apartment 2 weeks later. No appeal was filed, and no public statement was made about her situation. She simply disappeared from the social circles where she had once been prominent. Then came the federal charges against my father. The indictment was comprehensive: wire fraud, falsifying financial documents, and obstruction of an audit. A press release from the Department of Justice confirmed that he had been taken into custody without incident. His request for bail was denied by the judge, who cited him as a significant flight risk based on recently discovered evidence. A hearing to address the full slate of charges was scheduled for the following month. Reporters descended immediately, surrounding my parents' last known address with cameras and microphones. One neighbor went so far as to put up a no trespassing sign just to avoid being associated with the situation by proximity. My mother released a short statement through a newly hired lawyer, blaming online harassment and a culture of public shaming for their troubles. But her words found no sympathetic audience. No newspapers printed her statement, no television programs aired it, no online outlets shared it. The public had heard enough from them and wasn't interested in their excuses anymore. My sister vanished completely from the online world where she had once cultivated such a carefully crafted presence. Every profile was deleted, every account closed. The last we heard, she was staying with someone in a nearby town, perhaps a distant friend or acquaintance she hadn't alienated yet. Either way, no one in our circles particularly cared about her whereabouts anymore. She had lost every platform she had once used to perform her version of reality. Lily declined every media request that came her way following the documentary's success. National news outlets called repeatedly. Talk shows offered exclusive interviews with generous compensation. One publisher approached her about writing a follow-up memoir to capitalize on the public interest. She turned down every single offer without hesitation. The story had already been told accurately and completely. People just hadn't been ready to hear it until now. Instead of pursuing further media exposure, Lily contributed to a podcast series that followed the documentary. The 5-episode audio series took an investigative approach, featuring multiple guests and expert perspectives on family financial abuse. Lily participated, but only as an anonymous source. No name attached, no photos shared, just information provided to help others recognize similar patterns in their own lives. That's all she had ever wanted, for the truth to be available to those who needed it. Then we made the decision to leave, not in a dramatic escape or under cover of darkness, but as a planned, deliberate move to start fresh. We chose a quiet city a few hours away from our previous home. It was a place with no family connections, no overlapping social circles with our past. We found a modest but comfortable home situated on a hill, with a long, open backyard that got wonderful sunlight. Lily planted a garden the very first week after moving in, tomatoes, mint, and a small lemon tree to start. When I asked why she had begun planting so quickly, while boxes were still being unpacked inside, she didn't hesitate with her answer. I'm tired of tearing things down. I want to grow something now. Last week, an unexpected letter arrived in our mailbox. There was no return address, but I immediately recognized the handwriting on the envelope. It was from my father. Inside were 3 pages of dense text, but I only managed to read the first page before stopping. It contained the usual excuses and justifications, twisting facts and claiming we had misunderstood his intentions all along. I didn't bother reading the second or third pages. I didn't need to. The past was finished talking, and we weren't listening anymore. My father ultimately pled guilty to the charges against him. There was no drawn-out trial, no defiant closing statement, no last attempt to portray himself as misunderstood. He accepted a plea deal that methodically listed out each financial crime like items on a spreadsheet: wire fraud, identity theft, obstruction of justice. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in federal prison and ordered full restitution to every person he had defrauded over the years, including me. Court documents showed the exact figures owed to each victim. My name appeared on page 4 of the judgment, next to a dollar amount that had been hidden from me for over a decade. He was led out of the courtroom quietly. No cameras, no dramatic scenes, just a space finally emptied of the excuses that had filled it for so long. my mother filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy 2 weeks after my father's sentencing. The financial disclosure forms revealed debts totaling just under $1 million. Most of it stemmed from legal fees, unpaid property taxes, and defaulted lines of credit she had co-signed with my father over the years. Her filing listed zero income, no property, no vehicles, and no dependent assets. She now rents a single room from a friend of a distant relative. A humbling fall from the expansive home and lifestyle she once flaunted at every opportunity. No one has heard from her directly since the bankruptcy filing. Her phone has been disconnected, and the last social media post she ever made was a simple photo of roses with a single comment and no likes. A final, lonely digital footprint. My sister made one final public appearance at a court hearing where a judge formally barred her from owning or managing any business for the next 10 years. She didn't contest the ruling or offer any defense. She simply nodded, signed the agreement, and walked out of the courthouse carrying a duffel bag that appeared to contain her remaining possessions. Someone later reported seeing her board a bus that evening, leaving town without telling anyone where she was headed. That was the last confirmed sighting of her in public. Her name hasn't appeared on any digital records since that day, as if she's intentionally living off the grid to avoid any connection to her past. Meanwhile, Lily's career trajectory continued its upward path. She signed with a major publisher after weeks of careful negotiation. One editor had initially suggested toning down certain aspects of her story to make it more palatable for mainstream audiences, but Lily immediately walked away from that offer. She eventually found the right publishing partner, someone who respected her authentic voice and her non-negotiable terms. She wasn't writing for general commercial appeal. She was writing specifically for people who never saw the betrayal coming in their own lives. Her first book breaks down in precise detail what financial coercion looks like within family systems, how to safely document evidence of manipulation, how to build practical exit plans when needed, and what legal options are available to survivors of economic abuse. She didn't want to simply sell a story of pain and victimhood. She wanted to package power and practical strategies for others facing similar situations. The documentary continued gaining traction at film festivals around the country. Though one smaller venue backed out at the last minute, citing concerns about potential controversy, the film was quickly picked up by several larger festivals. It went on to win Best Investigative Feature at one of the most prestigious international documentary festivals of the year. Lily didn't attend the awards ceremony. On that same day, she was at home planting a row of sunflowers across our backyard. When I asked her about the award and the recognition it represented, she didn't even check the press release or social media reaction. She simply said that the garden needed more light and continued with her planting. Online, people couldn't stop talking about Lily's story and approach. Fan art appeared, essay analyses were published, and group discussions formed to examine the broader implications of her experience. Some creative viewers made detailed video timelines piecing together the story's progression. One particularly viral post claimed that Lily had rewritten what justice looks like for survivors of family financial abuse. She ignored all of this attention and commentary. She had said everything she needed to say through the proper channels. The rest was just noise that didn't require her engagement. A final legal hearing granted us a permanent restraining order against both my mother and sister. The terms were comprehensive. No contact of any kind, no third-party communication attempts, no digital messages through any platform. Not now, not ever. If either of them attempts to circumvent these restrictions in any way, it would constitute a direct violation, punishable by law. The judge made it absolutely clear that this door was permanently closed and no appeals or modifications would be entertained. 3 months ago, Lily gave birth to our son. The delivery room was peaceful and quiet. No drama, no complications. She held him first and whispered something I'll never forget. "You will never inherit their lies, only our truth." He blinked once, wrapped his tiny hand around her finger, and fell peacefully asleep. The hospital staff commented on how unusually calm he was for a newborn. We didn't share anything about our family history with them. It wasn't relevant to this new chapter of our lives. A month after our son's birth, we took the final step in separating ourselves from my family's legacy. We legally changed our last name, Lily, our son, and me. It wasn't a dramatic gesture or a publicity move. It was simply paperwork that formalized the clean break we had already made emotionally. We chose a name that symbolized renewal, taking it from Lily's grandmother's family line, a woman who had survived her own battles and live to teach others how to heal and rebuild. One evening, not long after the name change was finalized, Lily handed me a folded piece of paper. It was a letter she had written to her past self after completing the manuscript for her second book. It wasn't about regret or dwelling on what had happened. It was about closure. The letter served as a goodbye, not to the pain she had experienced, but to the silence she had once accepted as necessary. After letting me read it, she folded it back up, sealed it in an envelope, and placed it in the back of her journal, where it would remain private but not forgotten. Lily also launched a digital support group specifically for survivors of family-based financial abuse. She didn't market it aggressively or promote it through mainstream channels. It spread organically through word of mouth and carefully placed resources. Within just a month of its quiet launch, the group had grown to over 10,000 members. People from around the country began sharing their stories, exchanging resources, and developing strategies for protecting themselves and rebuilding their lives. One user wrote a comment that particularly moved Lily. "I thought I was the only one until I found this group." She checks in on the community daily, not as a formal moderator or authority figure, but simply as someone who truly understands what others are going through. My therapist once asked me during a session if I missed my family. I told him the honest truth. I missed the version of them I thought they were, but that version never actually existed. He nodded thoughtfully and moved on to other topics, understanding that there was no more to say about people who had never been who they pretended to be. Last weekend, I was cleaning out the attic of our new home and found an old box I had packed during the move, but hadn't looked through yet. Inside were photo albums from years ago. Birthdays, graduations, family dinners that had felt warm and genuine until the truth came to light. I asked Lily if we should throw them away, not wanting to keep painful reminders around. She looked through one album carefully, paused on a particular photo, and said something profound. "Keep them. They remind us of who we refuse to become." The legacy we inherited from my family was fundamentally broken, built on lies, manipulation, and exploitation. But the one we've built together piece by piece, record by record, day by day, stands intact and true. I married a woman who didn't just survive betrayal. She exposed it methodically, dismantled it systematically, and planted something infinitely stronger in its place. In the rubble of everything they tried to destroy, we grew something they never could.